Welcome to New Tracks Live. New Tracks Live is the weekly meetup of the New Tracks modeling community that provides unique mentoring opportunities to enhance your modeling skills by connecting with talented modelers and manufacturers from around the globe who generously share their knowledge and artistic expertise. Build your confidence, refine modeling techniques, and share your projects with a supportive community of fellow modelers, all while enjoying the world's most rewarding hobby. Join us every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern on Zoom and YouTube for the live meetup. Missed a program? No problem. Individual show segments are uploaded to YouTube for convenient on-demand viewing. Be sure to connect with the New Tracks community by joining the New Tracks Facebook page, where you can interact with other modelers and see what they are modeling. Visit our website at www.newtracksmodeling.com to register to receive Zoom links for the weekly meetup and get more modeling information. And now, here is the host of tonight's New Tracks Live, Phil Edholm.
Hello, welcome to New Tracks Live for January 21st. New Tracks Live is the live weekly meetup of the New Tracks community. New Tracks was started by Jim Kello back about 5-6 years ago now. And we actually have different ways for the community to get together. We have this weekly meetup, which is both on YouTube and on Zoom. We also have a Facebook group where you can talk more about modeling. And then everything on the weekly meetups is actually recorded and is live on the YouTube channel. So some great opportunities to meet with us. What I'd like to do very quickly is just talk a little bit about what the content is for this evening's program. We're going to start off this evening with Bill Davis with a really interesting presentation about kind of a background on Cabees and how Cabees and Cabooses have been used by the railroads through the years. Then Greg Cassidy is going to do the first part of a micro layout, building a micro layout. We have a really cool layout visit this week. Craig Veitch has done a visit to his layout, which is the Burrawon branch of the New South Wales Government Railways. And it's a very cool layout and some pretty amazing modeling. So I'll get a chance to see that, and Craig's with us, so he'll be able to talk a little bit about it as well. And then we're going to close the program tonight with Dennis Brennan. And Dennis is going to spend time talking about when you're going to take a picture that is for more than just documenting, where you actually might want to put it in a magazine, make it a cover picture, make it something that you put on the wall. How do you think about the steps to make that picture great before you actually snap the shutter? So before we start, just a couple of real quick points. First off, I'd like to thank our sponsors, New Tracks Mentoring Inc., which runs the New Tracks live meetup, as well as the New Tracks Mentoring Scholarship. I would like to thank our sponsors. This year, we have 3 platinum sponsors, the Great Scale Model Train Show, the Amherst Railway Society, which their event is, I believe, this weekend coming up, and Brennan's Model Railroading. We also have 3 bronze sponsors, Locofi, Santa Clarita Railway, and O-Scale Central. So very much want to thank them. So with that, I'd like to thank our sponsor of the show tonight, or the event tonight, which is Brennan's Model Railroading. So we'll just do a quick video from Brennan's about their products for the market.
New Tracks thanks Brennan's Model Railroading for being a 2026 Diamond sponsor of New Tracks Mentoring. For over 25 years, Brennan's Model Railroading has been offering products focused on the O-scale market. Brennan's focuses on landscape materials and craftsman kits. Brennan's Better Ballast is a prototypical size and natural color blend of real crushed granite, and Brennan's has developed a complementary line of natural ground cover materials. Brennan's craftsman kits are designed to deliver great results that anyone can build. The complete photographically illustrated instructions explain in step-by-step detail how to create an outstanding model. The Frank Ellison Tribute series of kits take Ellison's scratch-built iconic structures to a new level using modern methods and materials. See the complete line of products on the Brennan's Model Railroading website. Use the QR code to visit.
Before we start, did want to do one little quick question for everyone, which is we definitely really need you to help us and become a NewTracks mentor. Presenting on NewTracks Live is really easy. You know, guys, a couple of folks that are here, Bill actually, and I did his presentation today, very easy. Craig actually is going to do a presentation in a couple of weeks. Sent some slides up, uploaded them to the server, and we produced the materials for his presentation. So if you're interested in presenting something, if you have a topic you'd like to talk about, or if you know someone that you talk to and say, hey, would you like to come on? They say yes, just click on the URL code here, tinyurl.com NTM present, or shoot the QR code with your phone, answer a couple of questions, and that way we'll have the information to contact people and set up a presentation for the event. Before we start tonight, we'd like to very quickly, before we actually start the program, would like to talk about the NewTracks Mentoring Scholarship. The NewTracks Mentoring Scholarship is an exciting part of what we do at NewTracks. We have a little video here that I'd like to run, if I can find it, and talk about what we're doing in the scholarship this year.
Are you a model railroader going to college in academic year 2026-27? Apply for the NewTracks Modeling Mentoring Scholarship. For 2026-27, 3 individual $2,500 scholarships will be available for model railroaders pursuing a STEAM degree. Science, technology, engineering, arts, and math are all key parts of model railroading. You can apply online at the QR code shown. Model railroaders can support the NewTracks Modeling Mentoring Scholarship, the only national scholarships for model railroaders from a nonprofit organization. Donate online on Zephy. All donations are tax deductible.
So I'd like to ask Hank Primus, who's actually here with us, to make a couple of comments about what we're doing this year with the scholarship. Hank is the chairman of the scholarship committee and really driving our movement, both in terms of raising funds for 27, 28 now, I guess it is, as well as getting applicants for our 26, 27, where we have those 3 $2,500 scholarships. So Hank, I'll throw it to you.
The benefit we're working on right now is to get applicants for the scholarships. We don't have a lot, and I'm looking to anywhere where we can get young people to apply for scholarship. The universities that have railroad clubs, and I've been looking anywhere to any railroad club that has young people who basically go on to school further on. I would appreciate if everybody on the show talk to young people and for them to apply. I would truly appreciate it. Then we will, once we get the ones in, we will go back to some funds in the program. My there, and we'd appreciate all applicants. All applicants. Now that's Phil.
Excellent, excellent. It's and it's an exciting time, you know, having the 25, having 2, 3 $2,500 scholarships is absolutely a great idea for the students. We look forward to having some great applicants this year, as we've had in the past. So our first discussion tonight, our first segment, is Bill Davis. Bill's going to come on and talk a little bit. Let's see, I was going to add him on here. There we go. He's going to talk a little bit about Cabees, or I guess Cabooses. I don't know exactly what the right word is. Bill, I'll let you talk to that. So take it away, Bill.
Right, share. So
Oh,
we're going to talk about Caboose. Am I up
I
there?
was going to let you were going to do it. I apologize. I was going to let you share, and I was
Okay.
doing it for you, but go ahead and you can do it.
Okay.
Gee, that unstructured stuff shows up already.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. What have I got not happening here? Share. No. Maybe you are going to end up doing it, Phil.
Okay, I'll do it. Not a worry at all here.
Yeah, I don't know what's not going on there, but something's weird. Anyway,
Hang give me 2 seconds. I have to re-bring up the slideshow on my
okay.
my monitor. I taken it down,
Yeah,
so hang on. Just give me 2 seconds, and we will be set to go.
right.
There we go.
All right, next slide. So there's a lot of legends and facts concerning the caboose. I'm not able to separate the legends from the facts, so I will simply share what I've come to discover about them. So next slide. The origin of the name of the caboose comes from the Dutch or German word cabuses or cabus. Next slide. This was originally used to as a term for a ship's galley. It is still used today on British ships. Next slide. Next slide. Prior to 1830, early trains didn't have a caboose. The trainman rode on a car or on the hooded area as on the John Bull. Not much protection from the elements. Next slide. The next development is a small shanty on a flat car. There are no pictures of these cars today, but this logging caboose could be a similar design. The actual origin of the caboose appears to have dated back to the 1840s when Nate Williams, a conductor uh, on on the Auburn and Syracuse Railroad, became fed up with the crowd, cramped and uncomfortable quarters to do his paperwork. This was usually done in either a free space of a passenger car, combination baggage car, or a shanty on a flat car. Next slide. To fix the problem, Williams found an unused boxcar, and using a simple box and a barrel as a seat and a desk, he set the shop up in the car. Next, not only did he find that he had plenty of room to work with, but he figured he could use the unused space for storing tools, flags, lanterns, spare parts, etc. During the Civil War, boxcars were modified for use as conductor cars. Here is a picture of one of these cars built by Brennan Kaminsky in O-scale. Next slide. Perhaps the most striking feature ever applied to the caboose was the cupola. According to the story, Chicago Northwestern conductor T.B. Watson in the 1860s reportedly used a hole in a boxcar roof, which he used as a caboose. He got a better view of the train. It is said Watson was amazed by the view. He could see ahead, all sides, the rear. He convinced the shop to build an enclosure. The cupola was born. Next slide. In the 1870s, the caboose was introduced in Canada. They were called conductor vans. Next slide. It was the 1880s that Westinghouse introduced automatic air brakes. This changed how brakemen's work. No longer were brakes applied by hand every time a train stopped and had to stop. And the guy had to walk from car to car to set the brakes. It was an eight. Next slide. I'm sorry. By 1900, steel was becoming more common. Even if the body was wood, the underframe was now made of steel. Next slide. By the 1920s, more and more cars were being built of all steel, like this Santa Fe Caboose built in 1928. Next slide. The bay window was thought to have first been used on the Akron, Canton, and Youngstown Railroad in 1923. However, the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad, which was built all of its cabooses as bay windows, started starting as an experiment model in 1930. The bay window gave favor with many railroads because it eliminated the need for additional clearances in tunnels and overpass. Next slide. However, in January 1959, model railroader, master model builder, Jack Work built a model of a Canadian Pacific caboose, combo caboose, and bay window caboose. I assume it was all wood. It was built before the 1920s. Could this have been the first bay window design? Next slide. Radios. The first experiment with radios in locomotives and cabooses got started in the 1930s. The antennas were obvious and cumbersome. Mostly they were used in the rail yard areas. Lackawanna was an early pioneer in using radios starting in the 1950s. Originated the term radio equipped. However, it wasn't until the 1970s that railroads found radios could be reliable enough for regular dispatching. Next slide. There seems to be some question concerning the first wide vision caboose. Monon pioneered the design in 1951, but their design wasn't exactly like the production version we see today. They basically welded a bay window to the side of the cupola. However, in 1952, the Duluth, Mesabi, and Iron Range built the first of the typical design. It beats me why they had the extended vision cupola when there was usually nothing but little ore cars in front of it. Next slide. So 1980s to the present. With the advancement of technology, railroads saw less and less need for the caboose. The crew sizes were much smaller, recording kept requiring less paperwork. However, until 1980, the law of the United States and Canada required all freight cars have a caboose and a full crew. Reason was for safety. Eventually, technology advanced to such a point that the railroads, in an effort to save money, reduced crew members, stated that the caboose was unnecessary. Also, since wheel bearings were improved and line-side detectors were used to detect hot boxes, things changed. Roads still use cabooses as reach cars and lighter and tighter industrial inserts. Cabooses were also used as leads on extended branches and backwards pushing moves. They are called shoving platforms. Use caboose on a push moves to protect grade crossings with crew using flags and flares. Go back one. Notice that there's a whistle on this caboose. So I'm assuming that's what that whistle's there for, is either to signal the crew up ahead, they didn't have radios, or to use if it was backing up to let the engineer know what's going on. Next slide. Again. Next slide. Okay, so that's the basic history of cabooses. Next week, some interesting things about different types of cabooses and other facts. Next slide. Any questions, guys?
I thought that was quite interesting about that whistle. I would never have thought that was for that reason. You know, you're so used to having radios that you don't think of it.
Yep. And that was probably before they had radios regularly on engines and caboose and crews.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's very interesting to think about what they would have used a whistle for. You assume, it was either to signal to the locomotive engineer, or potentially I was thinking about that if you were backing up, and if you think about if you're backing through town because your line and you need to do grade crossings backing through town, you could use the whistle to do grade crossings going backwards.
Right.
But it's very interesting. Yeah, there were some pretty cool pictures. Anybody else got any other comments or questions?
Hey, Bill, do you have Bob Johnson's book on the PRR cabooses?
I don't have that book, but I have a couple books by a guy named Solomon on cabooses, which shows abundance of different cabooses.
Just letting you know it's out there and it's a good reference.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Anything else,
I
guys?
guess one of the questions that it'd be interesting, how often did crews sleep in the cabooses on extended trips versus just catching a nap on a, I'm wondering how often the crews actually stayed overnight on the road in the cabooses. Was that a common thing?
Well, you know what? If you hang out next week, you'll find the answer to that.
Oh, there we go.
For part
Predating the
two.
questions for next week.
Yes, sir.
I have one more question, Bill.
Okay.
Why did they put the caboose, the wide vision on that steel caboose to the outside? What advantage would it really have?
I could never figure out the advantage of a wide vision caboose.
No.
I mean,
If you're up high enough, you can see everything.
plus you have to lean way out constantly, which would be terribly uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And stuff for the guy doing the job. I don't know. It's just a weird design that they come up with. Yeah.
Thank you.
So next week we will do part two, where we'll cover a lot more information.
Railroad cars got higher. They needed the wide vision because the cupola was lower than the car in front of it.
Yeah, if they had the big cars, yeah, I could
So
understand
when
that.
they went to the high cubes,
Yeah. But then that's what the advantage of the bay window was for that. So yeah, I don't have an answer for exactly why they did that, but that's a logical answer.
It was interesting. A couple of years ago, went on a photo tour on the Cumberson Toltec, and ended up, when you get to there, you sign up for the tour and you show up and you get on the train. Was able to we got out and sat in the caboose at the back, and through the ride we're able to get up in the cupola a lot. And it's really interesting, very different view of a train you get when you're in the cupola and looking down the train. Even though that was a relatively short train, you really can see how they got a great view across the whole train and could see everything very well. So
especially in the curves,
excellent.
Especially in the curves and stuff like this, that would really give them an excellent view.
Yep.
Okay,
exactly.
So you all come back next week and we'll look at part two.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, and we really appreciate it. That's, it's great info, because everyone who models anything that's earlier than the I guess the 80s has to have cabooses and plan on them for their layout, and put all those pieces together. Yep. So before we jump to our next little segment here, I wanted to talk a little bit about our MyBuild that is coming up, and so I'm going to run a little video about the MyBuild.
Don't miss the monthly New Tracks Modeling MyBuild event. MyBuild is where the modelers of New Tracks show what they have been building. See amazing modeling with some MyBuilds featuring specific topics for modeling. If you would like to have your models included in the MyBuild, please email your modeling photos to chriscourse@railrunner130@hotmail.com. If you are a first-time MyBuild participant, please include a photo of yourself.
Unfortunately, Chris isn't here tonight. I think he is going to Amherst to the train show, and is probably getting ready to do that this weekend. I think that's probably one of the reasons we have a little lighter group this weekend, or this week. But our next, the next MyBuild is February 25th. So we actually have a few weeks. We did the one the week this month a little earlier. So if you have a model for the MyBuild, send it to Chris Course at railrunner130 at hotmail.com. I always wondered who Railrunner 129 was. It's just kind of an interesting question, but you guys will find out. I'll sometimes bring up some interesting questions like that. So with that, we actually have another outstanding presentation. We have Mr. Cassidy here. Let me see if I can find him here. There, he's jumped up. Greg jumped right up here to the front. Right there. No, it's finding you on the Zoom screen is always the challenge. So Greg's going to talk to us about building a micro layout, something that I think a lot of us have, if not actually been to do some of, have thought about. So with that, Greg, I'll throw it over to you and let you take over.
All righty. Let me get my sound on, optimize for video, and bring this up. And hopefully by now you can see my screen.
Yep.
All right. Well, everyone, welcome. I'm going to show you how I built my ON18 micro layout. And this will be part one, the concept and construction of it. So we're going to have a detailed overview of the Ute Creek ON18 model railroad layout. We'll be exploring the design, features, and development of the layout. And by the way, that last picture, this is the only time tonight that you'll see it looking like that. So this is going to be the agenda. Tonight we'll go over the concept, the track plan, building the rolling stock, and the structures. And then next week we'll do the scenery and challenges and enhancements coming. So for chapter one, it's concept and inspiration behind my micro layout. I've got some previous model railroading experience. I built an HO layout in my basement back in the 90s. It's still there. A few years ago, I built an N-scale portable layout for our model railroad club that we take to shows. And I've been constantly building structures for the last 20 years, for myself and for others. But despite hanging out with people who knew about narrow gauge railroading, I was not as familiar with it. In the 19th century, narrow gauge was very prolific, and we all know why they were built. They were less expensive, they could navigate sharper curves. They were both used for transportation needs for industrial as well as for passenger needs. And I love this picture showing the main 2-footer next to a standard locomotive. It's almost like it's Photoshop, but it's real, I tell you. One of the decisions I had to make was what my narrow gauge was going to be. I could make it a logging railroad like the main railroads. I could make it a coal hauler like the East Broadtop, which isn't that far from me. Or I could make it a mining railroad like you had in Colorado in the Southwest. Now, here's the origins of how this layout got started. I had been developing an interest in narrow gauge railroading, and micro layouts lend themselves to that. I had been developing an interest in the Southwest of the United States, and especially the mining history there, and gold mining was the one that I was focusing on. And this was going to be a mini layout, and its primary purpose would be to take to shows, to put on a table to attract attention. And the main reason was because Steve Sherrill challenged me to build it. Now, a mini layout or micro layout, the terms are used interchangeably. It offers narrow gauge in a compact format. The reason narrow gauge works so well with it is because narrow gauge works really well when you have small areas. They can include various things like industrial mining or dockside settings. There's all kinds of themes that you'll see people putting on their micro layouts. They're perfect for people who have a limited space or looking to explore narrow gauge, or who just want a portable layout. Now, my first induction into micro layouts was at the Micro Madness group meet last January, a year ago. And this is where I first got introduced to the wide variety of micro layouts that are available. I had seen some before, as you'll see a little later, but this was really jumping in the deep end. So here are some of the layouts that were at the micro meet last year. And they range the gamut from just, a little oval of track to fully formed layouts. And you'll see more of these throughout the presentation. I've also attended the Harrisburg Narrow O Show for a number of years, representing New Tracks and promoting their scholarship. This shows the first year that I went, which was 2022. And you can tell how my interest in narrow gauge and micro layouts grew as I kept going again and again. In the first year I went, I was mostly taking pictures of the show and people that I knew. That's Chris Corse at Conowingo Models down there on the bottom right. By 2023, I was still interested mostly in the show, but I had seen a couple of these smaller layouts now, and I was getting a little more interested in them. By 2024, I started taking more pictures of the micro layouts, and I actually got involved in the show that year as Chris and myself were helping Al Judy with handing out awards and door prizes. And then by 2025, after I had gone to the Micro Madness meet, all of a sudden I'm fully focusing on micro layouts of all kinds. And you can see the full gamut of themes that they can encompass. And I had taken my infant layout to the show, just to show people this is what I'm starting, and I was looking for ideas. And it's also the first time that I brought anything that was narrow gauge home from a show. Some of the other inspiration that I had gotten, I've always been a fan of Dave Meek's Thunder Mesa Studio, and he has many different narrow gauge layouts, almost all of them built in the desert Southwest. And I was always influenced by John Ford and other Western movies, especially after I had read the book Company of Heroes a couple of years ago, which is about Harry Carey Jr. and his life in the John Ford Stock Company. And as you probably know, John Ford used all of the Monument Valley for many of his movies. And like anyone my age, I was influenced by Looney Tune cartoons, especially the Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote. And I still love watching them when I can. So my design goals for this were threefold. First, it had to be easy to transport. It had to be lightweight, easy to move around. And I don't have a big SUV or anything, so it had to fit in my sedan. It had to be able to run with or without power, because when you go to various places, you can't always count on finding an outlet that you can plug into. And I wanted it to capture gold mine, the infrastructure that was in the Southwest where they did some gold mining. But I also wanted to embrace the whimsy that I've seen on many of the micro layouts. So chapter 2, the track plan and operational features. So I had to work a track plan onto this 2x2 square. This is all the stuff that Steve had given me to start with. So I started by just getting out my old trammel that I used for building my HO layout years ago. And I just put an oval on it, knowing that I could go down to an 8-inch radius using N gauge or 9mm track. And I played with a straight oval and an egg shape and a couple of other things, but I didn't like the look of any of them. And then I had a eureka moment, and I remembered that building a lot of my dioramas, it's always interesting if you put a building at an angle. And I thought, let me try that with the track plan. And I did that, and I think it worked out better. So I started playing with different switching opportunities. I had a couple of turnouts and a re-railer, and I played with different ideas to see what I might want to do with that oval. And once I came up with a plan, I knew I was going to have to solder a couple of the pieces of flex track together in order to make those curves. So I went ahead and took 4 sections of the flex track and glued them or soldered them into 2 sections that I could then bend around the curves. And I pinned some of the track down and went over it with the truck just to see how it worked, and it felt fine. So I said, okay, I think I can do this. And this is the tightest curve that I've ever made, so I wanted to make sure it would actually work. And then I went ahead and started soldering the feeders onto my track. And I was only going to need 1 set of feeders because there's just not that big a layout. And the testing for that went well, and I say sort of, because I didn't know that my power pack had failed. So when I put my Cato drive on it and I notched it from 0, as soon as it started applying power, it went to 100%. After I picked the Cato drive up off the floor and put the pieces back together again, then I was ready to move on. So the first thing I did was cut a notch where the feeders were going to go under the track. And then I started laying my track down and gluing it in place. I used pins to curve it around and then used weights after putting glue underneath it. There wasn't going to be any roadbed because this was laid in the desert. And this went very quickly. And pretty soon I had my track all the way down. All I had to do was put in the turnout. One of the things I knew I wanted when I started thinking about the desert theme was a dry wash with some kind of timber support for the track. So I cut that out using a hobby knife and just used a couple of pieces of 4x4 for my supports. And just like that, the track laying was done. Now I was ready to move on to working on the rail equipment. So chapter 3, the rolling stock and equipment specific for the layout. So these were the pieces that Steve had given me, a nice little Cato drive and 2 Carroll Creek Design Group pieces, a Caboose and a Shea locomotive cover that would go on the Cato drive. Now I started with the Caboose first, and I had a choice of 2 different sets of trucks that I could use, and I liked the 3D printed ones better, so that's what I went with. And the first thing I did was I primed all the pieces with a German red-brown primer, and then I brush painted everything that wasn't supposed to be that color. The only detailing I really did to it at that point was putting on the Lincoln pin couplers, and I added some stirrups that I had laying around, which being HO scale, they still worked out. And then I just assembled it using super glue primarily, and then I did a little bit of weathering on it, and that went pretty quickly. So then I moved on to the locomotive. It was already primed, so all I had to do was put the Lincoln pin couplers on. The chassis was going to be a press fit onto the Cato drive. Now the ore cars, those are the ones that I picked up at the Harrisburg show, and they're also from Carroll Creek. And they go together real easily. It was just super gluing the chassis to the hopper and then putting on the Lincoln pin couplers. There's a couple options you can add. I didn't do those because they weren't going to be relevant to my railroad. And then I used the same primer paint on those. And I used some brown paint to fill the inside and some brown Activa to look like leftover ore after they'd been dumped. And because this was a huge fleet, I had to keep them in order, so I went ahead and decaled both cars. That way I know which one's which. And I went back to weathering the loco. I did a little bit of painting on it, and I did some weathering on it. And through the course, I added a couple of details to it as well that you'll see later. And I even detailed the Lincoln pin couplers, the links that go to them. I glued on some nut and bolt castings and weathered them so that they don't just look like a piece of plastic. But I might change those out. I like a lot of the ones that I saw more recently. So chapter 4, now we move on to the structures. Now, at the Harrisburg show last year, I met Calvin Witt, who's this great kid from California who is doing laser cutting and 3D printing out there. And he had come all the way from California with a bunch of kits to sell, basically in his knapsack. And he had these laser cut kits, and I picked up the blacksmith shop and another one for $5. And you can't pass it up at that price. And this is what I brought home. It's basically a set of laser cut walls and some detailed parts, and then some tissue windows. And for $5, it's the best deal there is. Now that was a show special. So after distressing the siding a little bit, I went ahead and stained it. And for the laser board pieces, I went ahead and painted them with some parchment paint that I had thinned a little bit with Liquitex, and that way you can kind of get a worn paint effect on them. And assembling it was like any laser cut kit. I just put it together. I added the windows. I have a technique I use to make the windows look dirty. And I used AI to print out a sign. This was going to be the office for my railroad. Then I went ahead and added some supports and started weathering it. And my choice of weathering is artist pigments. I love using those. So at that point, that building was finished. And I moved on to what was going to be my tool shed or work shed. Now this I had ordered from Calvin's Etsy site, and you get 2 structures in one package for $16 with free shipping. Again, another great deal. So again, I distressed the wood. I used a lighter stain on this one and just put the shed together. And then putting the windows on, I went ahead and broke the glass in one of them and boarded it up. And for this one, I wanted to have a metal roof. So I got some of my corrugated paper roofing and went ahead and rusted it using Mission Models washes, which I love their wash, and then cut the pieces to size and applied them to the roof. Then I did weathering on that one as well, again, using my artist pigments. And so now we have an office and a work shed. So where are we now? We've got our track laid down onto our piece of foam. We've got all our rail equipment ready to run. And we've got our structures built and ready to go onto the layout. So we're almost done, right? Well, I had a running layout, but I had a vision and this wasn't it yet. But this was a good start and I was really happy with the progress so far. And I swear to God, I didn't work this out with Bill ahead of time, but for right now, that's all, folks. That's the end of part 1. And part 2, next week, we'll start looking at the scenery and how the layout came out. And I want to thank Phil for giving me this opportunity. And I want to thank you for watching.
Well done, Greg.
Oh, back to
Thanks,
you.
Greg. Thanks,
very,
Greg.
very well done, Greg.
Excellent, excellent. Any questions or comments? Anything? I thought the feeder wires, cutting them through the foam as a channel and filling it in was a great idea for that size layout. That was really a really good way to do it. And soldering the track together before you bent it was also a good idea. So
it's all stuff I learned, years ago. And just because you're working on a smaller size, you still bring along everything that you learned. Although there were a lot of things that I hadn't learned how to do, and this was definitely a learning process.
What was the most important thing you learned kind of in this first part of this, your research and early kind of track work? What was that? What was the interesting
Well,
it
wasn't so much that it was a micro layout, but that it was narrow gauge. I learned that it's really hard to rail items when they're narrow gauge because you're trying to move N scale tracks with a really wide body above it. And we're used to, moving the trucks with our fingers as we put them on tracks. And that's harder to do with narrow gauge. That was the first thing I learned.
So a narrow gauge re-railer probably is in order.
That's it. I had that re-railer. I thought about putting it on and I thought, no, it wouldn't look right. Well, it would have helped, but if I set it up for a show, it takes me a couple of minutes in the morning to set it up. And then so far they stay on the track. So, I guess all of my effort to make the track work reliable paid off.
Greg, was there any kind of bench work with it or just the foam?
No, it's just the foam. And as you'll see next week, all of the mountains and everything else on it is foam. When I move it, I take off the buildings and obviously the equipment. So I have a piece of foam with some foam mountains on it. The whole thing weighs about 2.5 pounds and it's easy to move. It's only 2 feet by 2 feet. So
how thick was the foam again?
2 inch.
2 inch. Oh, okay. That gives for
no, I'm sorry. It was 1 inch foam.
1 inch. Okay.
Foam. The mountains I've made out of 2 inch foam.
Okay. Well, very
Greg,
cool.
where in Maryland do you live?
I'm in the Rockville area.
Oh, okay. You're not far away then. I'm
No.
over Dover. So, but I wanted to talk to you a little bit more about it. I've just started building my an extension from my shelf layout onto a 30-inch by 6-foot banquet table. And I was wondering if I could lean on you for some ideas as far as track and then also a track layout, because my shelf layout is kind of simplistic. It's got one piece down the middle.
Absolutely. I'll put my email in the chat and you're welcome to get in touch with me.
Okay, Greg. Thanks a bunch.
And you also, Bill, take a bunch of pictures and come back and talk to us about your experience and your learning. It's always a great thing to do.
I got one picture of it already because I've got the banquet table with 2-foot extension pipes on each leg. So it gets up and straddles the bench or the love seat that I'm using for my storage unit underneath. It also gives you a place to sit. And it's surprising how much room there is underneath that thing. But it's up right about armpit high. And I think that would be very convenient as far as not having to get underneath it and then him tunneling out his wiring. That was a stroke of genius because I was wondering how I was going to have to do that. But tipping up the foam, because you're building yours the same way I had planned on mine, although I
Mhm.
was going to put a little wood frame around the bottom just to keep it stiff because it's long.
Yeah, if I wasn't moving mine around all the time, a frame would definitely make it a little stronger, but I really wanted it to be lightweight.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, super. Thanks very much. I really
And
appreciate your presentation. The
Thank you.
Caboose
and
one was
Bill,
good too.
Bill, one comment: when you come to the edge of your foam, be really cognizant that the foam does tend to shrink a little bit over time. Even that good pink or blue foam seems to shrink a little bit, and so as you come to the edge, you kind of got to manage the edge a little bit. Otherwise, you can kind of get a ski jump there.
DY2 at VER.
Okay, thanks very much.
Absolutely. Any other questions for Greg? Well, that was absolutely great. We're now going to go on to our next segment, which is actually a layout tour. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to ask Craig Veitch, who's here. Craig has actually joined us tonight from down under from Australia. And we have a layout visit of Craig's layout. And I'm going to go ahead and run that, and then we'll have an opportunity for Craig to make some comments and for ask some questions afterwards. Pretty cool layout tour here. If I can find it. There it is. So here we go.
So very quickly, it's 2 levels in a 12 by 10 room. It's linked by a helix, and it has. The video actually starts showing an open staging area, and I've always been inspired by the work of Paul Dolkos, the New Hampshire division layout of his, and his recommendation that if you've got a staging area that's out in the open, put some light scenery on it. It's part of the layout. Why not just pretty it up a little bit? And that's what I've done with that. So. Is this? There we go. Yeah, so there's a little open staging area, and it runs around the back of the helix, which has a hidden staging area in it. And as I said the other week with the quarry diorama, it's sort of the first thing that hits the eye. The top deck is the branch terminus, and it's modelled on a prototype station. And the lower deck is the junction station. So just back to the open staging again. As you can see, there's not a lot of room, but it works well enough, and can keep 2 or 3 operators occupied for an hour or 2. Most of my layouts over the years have had helixes. But I always top them with some scenery so that the space isn't wasted. It's my Scottish heritage, I think. Don't waste anything. So here's the junction station, main station building in the background. That's what New South Wales Railways call trucking yards, stockyards. And then we come around onto what is the yard that really services the branch, not the mainline station itself. We're coming up to a little river, but I call it a river. It runs through. It's inspired by a creek that runs through our place. That's part of our herd. We run belted galloways. Each animal has an individual belt pattern that I've sort of copied off many of our breeding animals. All the trees are handmade wire armatures. And in the background's a double track main line that goes into the hidden storage. And in the foreground here is the branch line that enters this tunnel and then on up through the helix. Nearly 6 turns. And now we're just looking across what's the mine, the quarry site to the farm, and both the house and the dairy are inspired by places on our place, and they're in 2mm scale to force perspective. This is HO, by the way. That road's inspired by a road that I drive over fairly regularly. It's about halfway between me and our town, which is 50 k's away. That particular little bridge is shown up regularly on the internet, rarely with credit. Seems to have caught people's imagination. The prototype station did not have a wheat silo, but I had that left over from previous layout and I didn't want to sort of waste the opportunity to put it in place. That used to be the engine siding for this branch, but it disappeared 5 years after the branch was opened, so it wasn't a very long history. That's the men's toilet for the station. Only in New South Wales and country stations, the men's toilets were always one chains, 22 yards, no, 66 yards actually, 3 chains from the station building. A small goods shed and a goods line siding in the foreground there. I made these houses in 3mm scale, again, to sort of force perspective, just ease it slightly, and to lift them above the height of the rail line to, again, give them a little bit of distance. This is running up the quarry branch. My favourite locos. They're actually Elco. They're part of the World Series locos, DL531 as I recall, and they run on gauges from 2 feet up to 5'3", not just in Australia but around the world. So very adaptable little locos, and they are tiny compared to the other locos on New South Wales network. That footbridge is scratch built in brass and nickel silver. Everything on the layout bar the silo is scratch built. I didn't make the signals. They all operate. They run on linear servos. So very nice movement. And the guy who built them is a brilliant modeler in his own right. So this is the trucking yard from different angles. There's a sheep section on the right, and then the cattle section is on the left. Did a little talk on making that shed a couple of months ago, I think. This is another Elco World Series locomotive. This is the creek behind the line, and then at the baseboard edge looking towards the line. Heading up the branch line. Maybe a view that people don't see often. It helps to have a 6'4" son who can stand on a chair and photograph downwards. So as I said, that's 2mm scale, both those buildings. And obviously N scale cattle. Looking down onto the helix and then looking up. The line on the right is the quarry and the straight ahead line is to the branch. That photo turns up fairly regularly on the internet and I don't put it there. I was going to put cattle in that yard, it just didn't work, so I put sheep in. They're just being slightly smaller work better for perspective. We get lots of red-bellied black snakes, and they're a common thing in outdoor toilets, so thought I'd put one in for a bit of fun. Again, that's the male loo. toilet block. And the behind, obviously, this you can see is grey. That's a blind. It actually looks out onto the property, which is why I did a couple of photos with the real scene in the background. That's an actual place, and it's got 3 different fences around it: 1 metal, 1 wire, 1 timber. There's 80 handmade trees in the quarry scene, and there's another 100 handmade trees elsewhere on the layout. So there we go. Thanks for your time.
A friend's layout, or a layout you visit. Please take a 4 to 8 minute overview video of the layout and take 20 to 30 still images. Send an email to Phil at the address on the screen and you will get a cloud drive to upload the videos and photos to.
Exceptional, Craig.
Thanks,
Scenery,
Will.
everything. One question: what is the yellow car behind the engine at the quarry?
Yes, that's actually a ballast plough that has crew quarters in it, including a cooking facility. So it's got warning signs at each end, to rough shunt, because it has a couple of large LPG tanks in it for the cooking. So certainly in the period that I'm modelling, which is around 1980, these crews would go out on some of the rural lines and be gone for a week or more.
Wow.
So they'd be living in that, doing their track work and coming back to town.
Craig, I don't know which I liked better. Your scenery is awesome, but I love that stockyard that you built. That thing just looks perfect.
Yeah, I agree.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. Sorry.
Go ahead, Greg.
I have one question.
Yep.
How long have you been working on that railroad, Greg?
I actually started it about 5 years ago.
Wow.
When we moved down from Sydney in 2012, everything was packed away, and I never expected ever to get it out again. And then we remodeled the house, and I retired. So what had been my home office became available. So very quickly at the end of 2018, it's an Alberta arrangement, so all of that went up quickly. And my original plan was a single level. It'd just be the terminus station, modelled as it is now, because it's a preserved rail line now, or at least the stations. And very quickly I figured, no, I've done that. I've done a terminus to a staging area. And then I thought, I love building helixes. So, I had 3 helixes on my previous layout, so I put a helix in. And then it just sort of grew. And by the end of 2019, we'd been in a 5-year drought, and I just wanted to see some green. So I decided, right, I'm going to model this at least in a reasonable Australian summer. So they're sort of Australian summer colours. And then at the end of 2019, we had fires sweep through here that took out 130 houses and about 400 buildings or something, but missed us, fortunately. But we evacuated 5 times in 6 weeks, and we didn't know what we're coming back to. So the layout went into abeyance for a while. But I started building things where we were sheltering. And then it's just sort of grown since then. But it's really sort of sat unused now for nearly 2 years, because I'm enjoying scratch building more than I'm enjoying running trains. But I'm following Greg in that I've got a little ON18 that I'm working on. So
you might say model railroading helped take your mind off the worst part of life.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Greg, one
helped
question
me.
on on your Helix. I mean, I love the layout and the fact of how much modeling and actual models you can get into a space that's relatively small if you're creative in that in laying it out. But one question, you partially scenic the top of the Helix. I was just curious about why you didn't cover it completely and build it, why you left the hole in the middle. I mean, I understand for maintenance it's maybe better, but just kind of curious about that decision.
Yeah, and indeed that's it. First of all, the only way you can build the diorama in the back half is to be able to get up into the middle of the helix. On my previous layout, I had a double deck helix, so two helixes standing on each other. I covered that because I could stand inside and I wouldn't bump my head. But that's the thing, purely to get in. And that's why the quarry scene is at the front, because I could build the bank and everything from the quarry, so that most people, unlike my son's 6'4", so he can see over anything, but the rest of the planet, most of us sort of see the layout at eye level, and you just can't actually see that hole. And the way I've sort of organised the trees and everything is it's fairly difficult, even when you're looking at the farm scene, to be distracted by the hole in the middle. I had thought about, can I slide something up, and it was just, no, not worth it.
Yeah, I think speaking of trees, it would be, I mean, I don't want to add to your palette, but at some point it would be nice to have, I think, a little bit of a clinic on making some of those trees. They're pretty amazing, like some of the trees at Spur. Any other questions for Craig? Well, thank you, Craig. I appreciate the layout tour. And for those of you, I guess the last question I asked Craig was it a challenge to get this done and have it put together, or was it hard, or was it easy?
Fairly easy, I guess. Because I've always photographed as I've gone. Because one, I have a son who lives in Europe, and two, a friend who lives 50 odd kilometres away, who was just starting out in railway modelling. And so I photographed and videoed and sent stuff for them. And that's how I ended up on YouTube, even, because it was easy to do it that way. So this was just sort of an extension. And also, of course, I didn't use any of the footage, but I'd done something similar for my scenery AP. Yeah. Oh, and structures as well. Yeah.
Greg, do you have a YouTube channel?
Yeah.
What's the name of it, so we can find it?
Okay. It's Burrawon, Burraon branch.
All right, thank you.
Excellent. Like I said, I just encourage everyone, take the time, take a video of your layout, and a 3 or 4 minute video. It doesn't need to be a professional video. Put some pictures in, and we'll put a little layout visit together for you. So, excellent way to get involved and do that. So with that, we're coming to our last segment of this evening. Before we run that segment, our sponsor of this section is National Model Trains. And I have to say it, I'm actually in the wrong place in my system to play that. So I will hang on.
Is it MTM?
Yeah, it's the National Trains video. If you have that one handy, for some reason I'm not finding it here.
I don't
quite there.
Nope.
No, that's not it.
Nope.
That's not it. Well, we're going to skip it for this evening just because we don't have time. With that, I'd like to introduce Dennis Brennan. Dennis is going to talk to us about photography. And, it's interesting. I've learned more listening to Dennis about photography than I've learned the rest of my life. So Dennis is going to talk to us today about how to think about setting up to take that picture that's more than just documenting. The picture that you want to put in a magazine, you want to put on as your background when you do a Zoom video. So with that, well, I'll throw it over to Dennis, and and let Dennis talk a little bit about photography and what you do before you snap the shutter.
No, good evening, gentlemen. Happy to be here. And I'm a professional photographer, so I'm coming at things from a slightly different angle than a lot of you. And so I just want to give you a few things to think about before you snap that shutter. So let's take the first slide. Okay, now this is fine. This is a picture that I took, and it's for an ad. Okay, that's my haphazard packing company, and typically I wouldn't have that much sky in a photo, but the reason I included that much sky is because there's going to be printing over the sky that says haphazard packing company. It's the Frank Ellison tribute series, and then the haphazard packing company and a price. So that all has to fit. And of course, I want the building to be as big as possible. And I need the lettering and the printing to stand out. And so I shot the sky a little bit bigger than I normally would, only because I know that I'm going to crop down into it. And this gives me a lot more flexibility. So you need to think about composition is really critical when you're thinking about an ad, or you're thinking about a cover photograph for a magazine. You always have to think about how the print is going to interact with the subject. Now, on the next slide. This is the setup. As you can see, there is no sky there. I dropped the sky in Photoshop. It's actually pretty simple. It's called sky replacement. And they offer various types of skies, and you can enlarge it, or you can crop it, so you can use whatever sections you need. Anyway, this is a typical commercial lighting setup. A lot of lighting setups in commercial work are tabletops, and there's an overhead light. That's a 1,000-watt LED. Actually, it's a 2,000-watt LED overhead light, which provides all of the main light, the ambient light for the subject. And then on the very right, that Fresnel, it's an Arri Fresnel 1,000-watt lamp, and that's what creates the shadow. Go back to the first slide for a second. Now you see the shadows there? The shadows are really important to give you dimension. And that's critical when you're taking a picture and you want to simulate sunlight. And the key is, you'll hear all the time, well, you got to be careful of shadows. Well, you have to be careful of double shadows. If you do what most people say you should do, is put one light on the right and one light on the left and shoot it, and you're going to get two shadows unless you control the light carefully. So let's go back to the next slide. All right, so what I did here is the key light is on the right. That's the sun. Now you'll see another light behind that one on the right. That's lighting up the white backdrop. And then the other light on the left is lighting up the white backdrop. And if you look to the right of the upper light, you'll see another little light aimed, and that lights up the very top of that white backdrop and some of the side. And there's another one that you can't see that's on the other side. So the point is, you want to have an even light in the background. The more even that light is, the easier it is to replace the backdrop with a sky. Okay, next slide. Now here's an overview, and who says photos don't lie? The buildings in the back, that building, the oblong box company, the corrugated building, is just sitting there. I put another piece of like foam core up on blocks on a little piece of wood to make it level, and just stuck it in the background. And the building to the left, the little red building, that is actually on the diorama. Now the diorama started out and went up right to about where the sidewalk is. That was the size of the diorama. Go to the next slide, please. All right, now you can see the diorama. I added a piece in front of it so that I could put a street in there. What I did is I just took the diorama, extended it, I put a piece of wood down, and then I put what I use for a base on both of them is ceiling tile. I turned ceiling tile over and just put my scenery right on top of it. I painted it brown first, and then I sprinkled scenery. And the road, typically I'll use Durham's water putty to make a road, but this is strictly for a photograph, so I didn't feel any need to do that, and I made it sort of a gray color, and then I sprinkled what I call my street schmutz all over it. We'll get to that later. Next slide. Okay, now this is the back view of what I did. You can see I had to elevate the first diorama so I could set the other one down on top of it, and I had an even platform. And in the back, this building is just sitting there. There's no detail, there's nothing, but it works just perfectly with the photograph. Next slide. Okay, here's a close-up of the street schmutz and my Brennan Superior sand. There's not a great bit of detail, but there's enough detail there to give the photograph a little punch. And of course, the two guys are kind of important. Next slide. Okay, so here we go back to the original photo. Now I'm going to just look at a few things here. First of all, the key is the building, the Haphazard Packing Company. So what I did, I framed that building. Now, if you can look, I've used color. The building pops out because there's color behind it. The yellow really sets off the building. I mean, it's a nice foil for this weathered wood building. And rather than just have the background turn into nothingness, I have a building coming in from the right, which is part of the oblong box company, and then this little red structure coming in from the left. Now, there's a couple reasons that I did that, not just to frame the building, but when you drop in a sky, you got to be careful about where the horizon is going to be. If those buildings weren't there, you would definitely see the end of the platform or the diorama, and the sky would go right down to the ground. That would kill the illusion. So when you're thinking about doing a photograph, you got to figure out what is it that you're really shooting. If you're taking what I call documentary photos, and that would be just to document what you did. You worked on something and you want to show the scene in an overall view. That's one type of photograph. But if you're doing photos that you want to show off your modeling with, or a certain section of your layout, then you need to really consider composition. And it's not just the placement of the buildings, but it's color. Okay, you need to consider the color. You need to consider the action in the photo. Those two figures that I pointed out before, and there's another figure over on the very left on the red building, they add a lot to the scene because it draws you kind of into it. You've got two guys sort of talking to each other, and then you got another guy over on the left looking. It gives you a place to focus. And then the little truck, that adds another little interest to the scene. And you'll also notice everything is weathered, but not overdone. I think a big mistake a lot of modelers do is they overdo weathering. There's nothing against something being heavily weathered, but if you heavily weather every single thing on your layout, then there isn't any variation. So if you want you want to create some age over time, but not everything is going to be weathered the same way. So you need to think about that. So you need to think about time, space, color, composition, action. And I guess that's about all I can say. Next slide, which is the end. Are there any questions?
Yeah, are there any questions? But, Dennis, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and leave that up for any questions or comments because
Okay.
I think it's interesting. I mean, I thought, the idea of putting the yellow boxcars behind the building, both for being able to more clearly see the building, but also to block the horizon line on the sky is a really great thought. To think when you're setting up to take a picture of a model, to think about what can I use to emphasize the edges of the model I want to show. And I think the idea of putting those cars there that are yellow is an excellent idea. Really does make the picture, the building stand out relative to the background, where even if it was the blue sky, I think it wouldn't be as good. So that was excellent. Any other questions of Dennis or thoughts or?
Now, like you, Phil, every time Dennis talks about photography, I learn something new. Obviously, he's been working in it all his life. I hope I can just remember a tenth of the stuff that he talks about.
Well, thank you. What struck you that you learned?
Well, it's you're always talking about the framing, and this time it was just that little tidbit about the horizon. Those kind of things that I don't think about, and then I might take a picture and then I'll look at it and go, oh, well, I didn't even notice that when I was getting ready to take the picture.
Yeah.
Hey, Dennis?
Yes.
Could you do a segment one week, basically talking about depth of field and
Absolutely.
different ways to use it? And
Yep.
then another clinic maybe on aperture, doing not for depth of field, but for to make the scene darker or lighter, or using the tone or the brightness of the picture to express a mood.
Sure. Exposure.
Exposure. There we go. I'm sorry.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah, I was thinking about doing a segment on every aspect of photography. Depth of
Oh,
field.
that would be awesome.
Yeah,
That'd be awesome.
that would be something that, yeah, it would be like, basically what I'm trying to do is give you guys a master class in photography. Now, and take with it what you will. I don't expect that any of you are aiming to be professional photographers. And that's not the goal, my goal. My goal here is to help you see. Photography is really nothing more than seeing light, understanding. And the best way to do that is just really go outside and look at how light falls on buildings. Another good thing to do if you're trying to emulate a real shot in your model railroad. Most of us, I would think, have coffee table books of real prototype roads, New York Central, Santa Fe. I don't care what it is, but you'll see photos from the 50s, 40s, 60s, whatever. But look at those old photos and see what the photographers did there. That's what you want to try to get at. And the reason depth of field is so important is because most photos that you look at in those books, everything is sharp. And well, why is that? Well, that's because that's real life. It's full scale, and you stand a certain distance away, and most everything appears sharp. Now, you can make a photograph where you put the background out of focus purposely, but for model railroad purposes, the sharper it can be from foreground to background, the better off you are. And if you look at this photo, everything is sharp. You don't find anything that's not sharp there. Now, I backed off the camera. Yeah, the camera is in the foreground there, and that camera, I still have it set up. That camera is probably 8 feet away from the front of that building. And I've zoomed in, and that reduces the background, and it compresses everything. And that you don't need a wide angle lens to get up close and personal to get everything sharp. That's a big myth. A lot of the shots I get back with my camera and zoom in to get the framing. And but we'll do a whole segment on that. That has to do with depth of field and camera distance. All of this is related. So I'm glad to do that.
Dennis, it's Pat here.
Yeah.
Maybe you can help us compensate for the amount of lighting you're using. Those are expensive lighting. Maybe we could use something else. Maybe you can give us ideas of what we could use to compensate for that amount of light. That really means a lot.
Yeah, you don't need what I have.
No.
For sure. I have that equipment because of what I do.
That's your living.
But you can do it, and I've done it. I've taken photos where I had nothing more than one of those silver reflectors with a bulb in it, one of those clamp-on silver reflectors.
Yeah, I know what
with a suitable bulb, and that can be your key light, right? And then you'll notice, if you go back to one of the very first shots, the light shot, if you can go back to that shot where I'm showing everything back further, that one. Do you see the little card on the left-hand side? There's a little bounce card. That key light is, not only is it on the building, but part of it is hitting that card.
And bouncing back on the figure.
Yes, and that's filling in a little bit of the shadow side of the building, so it's not quite so harsh. So you can do things with I've done shots with one light and 2 bounce cards. So it's just a matter of how you set it up. And in fact, I can do a whole segment on using a simple lighting setup to come up with something that looks like that.
Thanks, Dennis.
Dennis, what I find really impressive is how even with all these lights and the bounce card, the photo still has very stark shadows. And I guess it's because one light is a lot brighter than the rest, because this makes it look like there's only one light source, like the sun.
Absolutely.
But when you look at all the lighting you did, I guess that's how we can see everything, even the stuff in the shadows. And again, thanks for a master class.
You're welcome. Well, that light, there's a big difference. That light, the other lights in there are called panel lights. Okay, they're LED panel lights, and they're 1,000 watts a piece. And the difference between that light, the key light, is what's called a Fresnel. It has a lens on it. and
Oh,
it's focusable. And it's like the kind of light that you'll see in studio shots on movie sets. That's what it is. My background is not only a photographer, but I was a producer director and a film. I've shot 35 millimeter motion picture film, 16 millimeter, all types of video. And those are the kind of lighting instruments we use. Some of them are Mole Richardson, but that's an Ariflex light. So it's focusable. I can tune that focus in and make that beam shorter, sharper, or softer. And it's very directional, whereas the other lights are very soft. And you can get, I can still get a shadow with them, but not to the degree that I can do with this one.
well, I understand. And when you use the phrase key light, I knew what your background was. I've been a student of film noir, and they talk about key lights, and that's something that goes back for almost a century. But it's so impressive how it's used here. And I can see now in that photo that shows all the different lights, how they're all used for a different effect. That's incredible, Dennis. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Glad that I can do this. It's a lot of fun. Any other
Excellent. Well,
questions?
Yeah, I've got one. You got to tell us about the tool you use to take the pictures. In other words, the camera. I take it's a 35 millimeter and not a cell phone.
Yeah, it's a Nikon D850. It's a 46 megapixel camera. I have it's a full frame camera, and a full frame means it's the same size as 35 millimeter frame. I'm an old film guy. I mean, I grew up taking slides. As a commercial photographer, you shoot slides, transparencies, and you don't have any latitude with exposure. It's either right or it's not. And so, and when you're doing 35 millimeter slides, every inch of that frame, every millimeter of that frame counts. You can't crop. You're not cropping a slide. So that's my background. And to this day, I still use a handheld light meter. Not that the meter in the camera is bad, but what the handheld light meter does for me is it tells me exactly any differences across the frame. And I will purposely have something brighter and something a little less bright. And that's what I'll use that meter for. The camera won't tell you that.
Okay, thanks. I started out with 35 millimeter film too, so I know what you're talking about as far as cropping and stuff like that. We had I don't know how many of you know Harold W. Russell. He was a master model railroader. He wrote a lot of articles for Craftsman and Model Railroader.
Model railroader, yeah.
Yeah, well, he did both. He did a presentation for our club one time on taking pictures with 35 millimeter, and it's quite interesting. No, so I know what goes on with 35 millimeter. I've got a lot of messed up pictures. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
No problem.
Well, super. Well, thanks, Dennis. That was brilliant. I did want to make one last comment before we left the photos. Did anybody happen to notice that was a 3-rail car in the background?
Yes,
I mean, the
I
interesting
could
thing
tell
is,
by the flanges.
but
Rail
you kind of
flanges.
tell when you look at it.
Not
But
until I said the look down picture and saw the third rail.
But what I'm saying is what's interesting about this every time I see Dennis do something like this, and he generally does use 3-rail cars because that's kind of what he does. I'm always amazed by how insignificant the difference is between a 3-rail layout car and pictures and something that would be 2-rail and more quote unquote scale. In the overall picture, it just doesn't matter at all, and you really don't notice it. So again, I think it's a strong comment of really the Dennis kind of the whole concept of high rail and the fact that, you know, there's only about 3 degrees of separation between a high rail layout and a 2-rail layout. So, well, thanks, Dennis. I really appreciate it. Absolutely super. And I think at this point I'll be able to, I think I believe I can run the little National Trains video that we have here. Let me see if I can get it to run. I don't know why. There it is. I just missed it before. So good. N-Skill National Capital Trains has been
National
sponsoring
Capital Trains is the largest supply.
I'm sorry, I just ran the wrong video. I'm going to skip videos. We're going to be bad for tonight. I think that brings us actually to the end of our program for tonight. We have a little caboose in a moment, but before we get to the caboose, I'd like to ask Father Ron to do our little traditional invocation here at the end of the evening. So, Father Ron, I'll throw it to you.
Master Maker of the universe, our scale models imitate your creative spirit, and we learn the genius of your handiwork. Teach us to appreciate all you have made. Amen.
Thanks, Father Ron. I think it's always amazing to me as we go through a program like this and talk about reality at the beginning, and then move in through Craig's presentation with an amazing model. Obviously, what Greg built with his call it for lack of a word, micro layout, and then end with Dennis. And it's really a lot of what we do is replicating the real world and doing it in a way that tries to replicate literally the genius of what we have. And of course, the beauty of what Dennis shows is how we can take pictures of that and show it to others and show it in the way we see it in our eye as we look at it. So thanks again, Father Ron. Thanks to everyone tonight for being part of the program. And we're going to close with a very short caboose tonight. One that I found that I thought was interesting just because of how absurd it was. So here we go.
Boy, did that rearrange the scenery. Oh, man.
That driver had a bad day.
But what was interesting was if you noticed, all of the signs, things along the track disappeared except the trees.
Yeah.
The trees didn't seem bothered by it virtually at all. Anyway, thanks everyone for joining us this evening. Hope to see you all next week. And with that, we will bid you all adieu and have a great week. Thanks again.
Thanks, Phil.
Thank you, Phil.
I thought I was interested the station. I thought I was interested the station was unfazed by the trailer also.
Yeah. Craig, did you put your email address